Okay, here we go. We're going to talk about the Portuguese army faction in Blood and Bayonets. This will be the last land-based faction that I talk about. I'm going to do one about all the naval factions, although I'm probably going to group them all together in one big video. So what we have here is 16 Portuguese line with a drummer, an officer, and this one has two flag bearers because the kit came with two flags, so I just put them on there. I'll pull one off if I use it as in a gameplay and add the national colors to the commander if I have a Portuguese commander. The Portuguese benefit heavily from being integrated with the English, although you can play them as a singular force by themselves. But if the Portuguese have an officer upgrade, they gain bravado, and they also gain the ability to lower their morale if they're within 3 inches of an English unit. So if they're near an English line unit, a unit in line, their morale will become 1 better. So if you rank your units up, you'd have an English line and then next to it a Portuguese line. So the Portuguese morale would be better because they're more steadfast with the English. They were heavily integrated with the English. You would almost call them the Anglo-Portuguese army. A lot of the officers were integrated. A lot of the Portuguese units had British officers. And if there was, say, a Portuguese colonel, his majors would be British. If there was a British colonel, his majors would be Portuguese. Obviously, in the beginning of the war, when Moore was retreating and Portugal was in a bad state and the French had almost totally conquered Spain, the Portuguese army was in pretty bad shape, but with the influx of British money, British equipment, British uniforms, and British training, they became a much more capable force, especially by the end of the Peninsular War. So there you have it. Portuguese line. The miniatures are from Warlord Games. They're plastic miniatures. Unfortunately, Portuguese are a little harder to source. They don't have a lot of miniatures out there. My collection is just basically made up of the Portuguese line. That's the one bit I have. But I have some photos of uniforms of some of the other units that are available that, miniatures are available for them, but I have some pictures for the other stuff. So we're going to pause here and we're going to take a look at the other units you can get in the army. Okay, next up in the Portuguese army are the Carcadores, the famous brown uniformed Portuguese that fought alongside the British. And within their units, they had the rifle-armed atiradori. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, so this is the best I could do. Might be pronouncing Carcadores wrong too. Within their units, they had the rifle-armed atiradori. They function similarly to a flank unit or flankers in a British battalion, or voltigeurs or lights in a French battalion. They would fan out in front, armed with their rifles. They function similarly to the 95th Rifles. They do have rifles. They have the 8-inch range bands. They get 3 reloads when they fire. They are trained instead of veteran like the 95th Rifles being there, but that'll mean that they cost less points. The negative to that is if you try to reload them on a heart or a spade, they're not going to get the free reload, so they're a little harder to manage keeping their rifles loaded. The Carcadores can function in a line, or they can function as skirmishers. Were armed with the brown bess musket by the British a lot, or indigenous muskets that they had. But they function as a group together. Obviously, they benefit from being near British because the armies were so integrated. So, a perfect setup would be a Portuguese line unit or Portuguese Carcadores unit, a British line unit in the middle, and another Portuguese Carcadore or Portuguese line unit on the right. And the British line unit would buff the 2 units on either side of them, buff their morale. So I'm going to show you a couple pictures of, this is a picture of what the uniforms look like. I also have a picture from Perry Brothers of some of the painted up atiradores. So that's what's on the screen now. And then we're going to move on to the cavalry. The Portuguese cavalry at this period were not in particularly good shape. They're probably the weakest arm of the Portuguese army. Their cavalry was made up basically of line or dragoon units. As you see, they're wearing like the Tarlington four-back crested helmet. And they also, some of the units wore shakos as the, conflict went on. But they were never highly emphasized. They were never really highly efficient arm of the army. That being said, you can take Portuguese cavalry, obviously, if you want to take it in your Blood and Bayonets force, but they're going to be an inexperienced cavalry force. The positive being inexperienced cavalry is they're not a lot of points, so they can be effective if they're handled well, if you send them around your enemy's flanks and potentially get behind or off to the side and then force them to worry about your group of inexperienced cavalry. But they're not going to stay on the battlefield very long if they take a lot of damage. Because of their inexperience, they have a relatively low morale. So that's a look at them. We're going to go on to take a look at the cannons after this. Also, I have a picture up of some of the cavalry that are available. They're also available from Perry Brothers. They're metal miniatures, but I'll put the picture up too so you guys can get a look at what that looks like. Okay, the Portuguese do have access to artillery, howitzers. It wasn't the strongest arm in their army either. They weren't as well equipped as some of the other armies, although because their army was so heavily integrated with the British provided a lot of the artillery on the field. But the Portuguese, you can take Portuguese guns. What I have pictured here is from Perry Brothers Miniatures. It's a medal. It shows the Portuguese gunners as they would have looked at the period. Not much more to say about the guns. I mean, obviously, you could easily attach a artillery piece to your Portuguese force. Just some final thoughts on the Portuguese force. They obviously work best when integrated with the British force because that reflects the historical reality of what was going on. The Portuguese army was heavily integrated with the British army, and they became progressively better as the war or the campaign proceeded. That being said, because of the scale of Blood and Bayonets, it's totally reasonable to take just a Portuguese force. I mean, you could equate it to, there's a Portuguese major that is given an order to protect a supply line or go move to a village to, secure supplies, and he gathers some men from his regiment, maybe some rifles, maybe some cavalry, and maybe a cannon to move forward to protect that and bring it back to the main body. Or you could integrate it with the British on a larger scale. So that's basically the Portuguese army in a nutshell. Any comments, any questions, any ideas, please post them on the video. And that's a wrap for now. Check it out.